Hey guys, welcome to the first Bio 202 lab. This is going to be a mini lecture just on the material that's focused in the lab exercises in order to help you complete the lab exercises. So, just a bit of a review from lecture material. So you've met me already. There are my office hours, just so you don't forget. Come see me Monday 5 to 6 p.m. or Tuesday 5 to 6 p.m. on Zoom. The link is on Canvas. We're going to skip this stuff. Don't forget that you have a quiz due every week. You have to submit your lab exercises every week. Later on, we're going to have a species spotlight group assignment, and then our exams. We have some exams. There are two exams. One is on the plant portion, which is the first bit of material, and then the second exam in lab is on the animal portion. So make sure you're studying for those. So how do you get an A in Bio 202? I might have mentioned this before, but just to reiterate, you need to do these things in this order. So number one, read the ebook on Hayden McNeil. You can access that just by going to the lab for the week and then clicking on ebook. Take the lab quiz for the week, which is also located on Hayden McNeil. Then watch my mini lecture video on Canvas that I've uploaded, just like this one, and then complete the lab exercises and submit the work on Canvas. You'll do a lot better that way. So this is just some stuff that I usually go over if we're meeting in person. So let's get right to the material. So Charles Darwin, he's very famous for coming up with the theory of natural selection, right? So he's basically the father of evolution. He went on a long expedition, as you know, and he came up with that theory, evolution of species by natural selection. He did that in the 1800s, and then he published a book about it. If you want, you can click on this and look at his voyage and everything, but that's really just supplementary material. So what he pretty much found was that on the Galapagos Islands during his trip, there were 24 different kinds of finches. He concluded that all of these finches originated from one finch from South America, and then from that species, not 24 kinds of finches, 24 islands. From that one species, 13 different finches evolved, right? And he figured out that all the finch beaks were different based on what they ate. So for example, we have some seed eaters, their beaks look like this, and then we might have some fruit eaters that have larger beaks specialized for those types of fruits, right? Maybe some insect eaters as well, okay? So that is that. Now, evolution versus natural selection. Well, evolution is the change in allele or genotype frequency over time, right? So here we have some chromosomes and we have these different alleles. Notice that one is a dominant allele and the other is a recessive allele, meaning that this individual would be heterozygous, right? So just different allele frequency over time. We have some different conditions that these could occur in, so that evolution could occur. So we could just have some individuals that survive better than others. Some migration could occur between populations. Random mutations always can cause new alleles to form. Population size changes, maybe due to a natural disaster or something similar. And so evolution versus natural selection, don't forget, evolution only works on the population level. So remember, we have individuals, we have populations, we have communities, we have ecosystems, right? So this is only working on the population level. Now, natural selection is a mechanism for evolution to occur. So the most successful individuals are going to pass their genetic information on. The least successful ones do not. So we pretty much just term this as survival of the fittest. Natural selection does lead to adaptations, so that way an organism can survive better in its environment, right? So for example, in this image to the right, we have a hummingbird who has adapted a longer beak in order to fit into tube-shaped flowers to receive a nectar reward. So other mechanisms of evolution, we have mutation, like I mentioned before. So those are random mutations. Gene flow, we might have two different populations and one species moves to another population and shares its alleles with that population, differentiating the gene pool, right? And then we could have genetic drift, which is a random event that usually is a natural disaster, like a hurricane, ice age, something like that. And it could change the number of individuals in a population, definitely mess up the gene pool that way. So all of these different adaptations, they are randomly influencing the population, and they don't always necessarily help the population. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I like this meme. It's pretty funny. Girls' hands be like this, because that's years of evolutionary adaptation due to the lack of pockets in most women's clothes. So we've just adapted to handling more things, because we never really had deep pockets like guys do. So what is a species? Well, we have this thing called the biological species concept, and it's basically saying that a group of organisms are considered a species if they can interbreed with each other. If they can't successfully mate with each other and reproduce, then they're probably not members of the same species. So how are species formed? Well, through the process of speciation. As evolution goes on, all these little changes add up to cause a new species to form. So this process is called speciation. Speciation can occur if organisms are reproductively isolated. That means they have different genitalia that just don't quite match up. Mutations can also cause speciation to occur, right? And then organisms can be physically isolated as well. This is called allopatric speciation. So this image to the left shows, two types of patricks, right? What allopatric speciation is you start with one group of species, right? A population. Then some sort of geological feature like a river divides the population. And over time, they build up allele differences, genetic differences, and adapt to their environments differently. So we've started with one species, but over time, we have two different species now due to physical isolation by this river, okay? So I just wanted to introduce these two ideas because you're definitely going to talk about them later on at some point, whether it's in this class or ecology. So we have coevolution and convergent evolution. So I just wanted you to realize that coevolution is when two organisms work together. They adapt together over time. So this is commonly seen in plants and pollinators, just like that hummingbird earlier. The flowers have adapted to have tube shapes. So that way the hummingbird can fit its long beak inside, and the hummingbird, vice versa, has adapted a long beak to fit its flowers inside the long tube. So they've worked together over time, right? And you can go back and read that later, but that's basically what I just said. So we have another type of coevolution here. This is actually a flower, not a bee, but it looks just like an orchid bee. So the flower resembles a female bee. A male bee might come along and try to mate with that flower, but no, it can't because it's a flower and not a bee. So during these attempts, it will pollinate the flower, which is good for the flower, but the bee, tries to move on, go find another flower, or go find another mate, it thinks, but instead it's just pollinating this whole time. So this is another form of coevolution. And then we have what's called convergent evolution. So convergent evolution is where you have two organisms who are just not even remotely related to each other, but they live in very similar environments, and so they're going to adapt to those environments similarly. So for example, we have this cactus, right? And then we have this euphorb. So the cactus has lived in a dry environment, right? And it's adapted succulent-like leaves filled with water. And so is this guy, this euphorb. Now, the problem is, when you're in a desert and you're the only thing around with a lot of water, people are going to try to eat you, right? So you might have some creatures that come along to try to take a bite out of you. So what they've done is adapted these spines that should harm the predators involved. So they both have adapted these spines. So these are just very distinct things that we can see. These guys are not related to each other at all. They're one's in the family Cactaceae, the other's in Euphorbiaceae. They're two different families. They do show the plant kingdom. So this is just another example that you can use, right? So let's get down to systematics. So this is the taxonomic ranking method. I really hope you've seen it before. But basically, we have all these different rankings. So we have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So here we have, genus, which is always capitalized and italicized. And then we have species. This is the species name here and the genus name here. Notice the species is lowercase. And both names, the binomial name is italicized. So Vulpes vulpes would be the red fox here on the left-hand side. Okay, so we have 3 domains of life that you need to know. If we go back to this page, domain is the highest ranking. It gets more specific as we go down, right? So 3 domains of life, we have bacteria, which are prokaryotes. We have eukarya, which are pretty much everything else. And then we have archaea, which are our very tough microorganisms that can survive pretty much anything. They're extremophiles. They can survive, high pH situations, low pH situations, very salty environments, very hot, very cold, very intense. So pretty much anything. So then there are 5 kingdoms of life that you need to know. So animals, plants, fungi, prokaryotes, and protists. And we will touch on every single one of these kingdoms throughout the semester. So back to the taxonomy. You need to know that all organisms have what's called a binomial name, or the binomial nomenclature, right? So common names are super confusing. We don't do common names ever. For example, there are multiple different kinds of poplar trees, multiple different kinds of passion plants, etc. You could call anything some fuzzy, hairy thing, right? So there's an international system to solve this issue where species have 2 different names, right? So those things are a genus and a species, and they're always in italics, like I mentioned before. So for humans, we have Homo sapiens. You can also abbreviate the genus with just the first capital letter, period, and then sapiens, which is the species name, lowercase. So don't forget, genus is capitalized, species is never capitalized. And here is the species that I work on, Theobroma cacao, that is shade chocolate. All right, so how in the world are you going to remember this taxonomic ranking? Because you're going to have to remember it. So I have a saying for you. My teacher in high school used to tell us that if you teach something related to sex, drugs, or alcohol, you will never forget it. So we have domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, which you could equate to dangerously kinky people come over for great sex. So there you go. You could also watch this cheesy video on your own time. Just a couple seconds of it will make you never forget. It will ingrain the saying into your brain. We'll skip that for now. So biodiversity, that's the class you're in. Basically, throughout the semester, we're going to just talk about all the different processes that have caused such diverse life that we have today. So all these adaptations that have built up over time. I love flower morphology. That's my favorite aspect of biodiversity. Flowers are so different. It's pretty cool. So systematics, back to it. This pretty much helps us understand relationships between organisms. So our goal as biologists is to figure out the relationships between all walks of life, like every organism pretty much, and how it works. So in order to do that, we can make phylogenetic trees that display these relationships. So on these trees, we put what are called characters or traits. These are features like feathers or fur or being tall or short. Just some words that you should know. Extinct, which you probably already know, just means that the lineage is dead. They're no longer around, right? But a word you may have not heard before, which you should definitely commit to memorization, is extant. That means that the organism's still living, right? So it's the opposite of extinct. So we have these cladograms, okay? And basically, this displays all these relationships between the organisms. and I'm going to break it down for you right now. So we have a nested hierarchy here. It's called a cladogram or a phylogenetic tree, right? And each of these parts here are leaves, okay? So the taxa, each taxon, individual taxon, right? So are these letters at the top. So we have A, B, C, D, and E. Not on the side, those are ancestors. So these at the top, these are all taxa. So if you wanted to count the different taxa, also known as leaves, on this tree, you would say there are 5 here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 taxa. Now, if you wanted to count the branches on this tree, well, you would count each line, including the internodes, okay? So we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we would say there are 8 branches on this tree, okay? Now, if you wanted to count the nodes, which are hypothetical ancestors that we don't really know what they were, but we just know that there was something there before these came around, right? We could say that there are 4 nodes on this tree. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, these letters may not always be here, but any vertice on a tree is a node. So if we had another branch here, and there was a connection point, that would also be a node, okay? So, and just a kind of fun fact thing, the root of the tree is the node at the bottom that connects all the ancestors on the tree. So, some words that you're going to learn in lecture that you should just know in general. Plesiomorphic traits are traits within a particular group that's not necessarily unique to members of that group. You might have seen them before. So, for example, scales, there are scales in snakes, but there are also scales in fish and other kinds of fish and reptiles. A synapomorphy or synapomorphic trait is shared by some taxa, but not others, okay? So all birds in general, it kind of unites all the birds. So feathers, for example, are in all birds, right? So all the taxa within the bird phylum, right? They would share feathers. And then apomorphic is unique to one taxon in particular. I don't have an example on here, but it would basically be a trait that's is just specific to one taxon in particular. And for you guys, before you leave and finish this video, just make sure that you submit your exercises on Canvas once you've finished them, and that you've completed the quiz and reading on Hayden McNeil. Those are both due on Sunday, February 7th at 11:59 p.m.